Hello and welcome back to Shh, the Girls Are Racing. I'm Miranda. This is a channel about women in motorsport and all things fun like that. Today we're going to be talking about the F1 Academy Netflix series that came out almost a month ago now, sadly during the midst of my university exams, so I couldn't watch it exactly when it came out, but I did do a whole one-day binge where I just I got through absolutely every episode. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about everything that went on, everything that I learned as a fan, because I felt like I did learn a lot. And yeah, just kind of talk about how cool it was, and it was pretty groundbreaking actually, I think. I'm hoping that this video can be a little bit shorter than my normal ones. I know my normal videos are actually pretty long, but it's about 5 degrees where I am right now in Australia. It's winter and it's freezing, but yeah, this is just a different setup. I just wanted this to be a bit more casual, just a bit of a chat about the series, because this is actually where I sat to watch the show. So I guess just to start off with, I just want to talk about a few little small things before we get into like the themes of the show, or what I felt really resonated with me. I really enjoyed how the show was shot and how it was kind of stitched together with the different girls' stories. I saw a few people complaining on social media about like the music being too loud or too aggressive, but I personally didn't find that issue. Like, I just thought it all came together. I think for me, I started crying in the first episode and I cried. I didn't stop. I cried all the way until the end. I think I cried when Leah Block started talking about her dad. I cried during Abby Pulling's bit about her grandparents, and then when she won as well, I cried. When Chloe won in Barcelona, I cried. I pretty much just cried the whole way through, because it was so special, and we really got to see behind the racer, behind the driver, see what goes on in their lives, whether it's family or just personal things going on, and we got to see the sacrifices that they make, the people that hold them together, the people that are behind them 100%, pushing them all the way to be the best that they can be. It was just so impactful the way that was kind of all stitched together. Really impressive, and yeah, really pulled on my heartstrings personally. I'm definitely a crier just at movies or anything really. Yeah, it was really impactful. I thought it had been put together so well, and so I think it's a massive sort of celebration for the production studio that put it together. I know that there was a lot of buzz about Reese Witherspoon being her production company, but Susie Wolf was also an executive producer, so I think that there should be a lot of kudos towards them for how they kind of framed F1 Academy and how they really engaged the audience. I know some people who've watched it who aren't necessarily the biggest motorsports fans, and they really enjoyed it and were really engaged with the different girls' stories and how it all came together, so I think that was really impressive. So I guess the two themes that I kind of want to touch on in this are pressure and the use of opportunities. It is clear to me from the series and just how much they focused on it that there is just a huge weight of expectation on these girls in the Academy. And the Academy is a feeder series, right? So it's supposedly the equivalent of F4 or like an F3.75 if you kind of compare timings at different circuits. But it is a feeder series, right? But it has this huge spotlight on it. You know, F2 and F3 do not have Netflix shows. Like, let's just be real. They face all this kind of this pressure, and it comes from themselves, it comes from their families, it comes from their teams, it comes from all these different angles. And I think that it's kind of easy to remember that a lot of high performance athletes face a lot of pressure from fans, from their teams, from their trainers, from their family perhaps. It's quite the same in F1. I think what really pushed my perspective to see the challenges that these girls were facing that are different to just like sort of a regular high performance athlete is the subtext that carried throughout the whole show of them being women in motorsport, them being in the spotlight in a series, in a feeder series, and feeder series don't normally get a spotlight. So already they're being heavily promoted, and that is a good thing, obviously, because it gives these girls exposure and it gives them the opportunity to take steps beyond F1 Academy. But there is so much more pressure for them being women and breaking down a barrier and effectively being some of the first. So these girls really are breaking down barriers, but they face so much pressure. I really felt like the fact that they are female, the fact that they face a lot more scrutiny than the men, I feel like that was more of a subtext of the show. They didn't really like go into it so much. It was a bit more about their families, the pressure face from the F1 teams if they're supported by one, and how they can sort of cope with it through relationships, through relying on their circles, their networks, whether that was like their friends, other drivers, or their family. But I felt like the being a female in motorsport was really, as a racing driver specifically, was really the subtext of the show, and it was more something you had to kind of like analyze yourself. It really did feel like that pressure makes the situation they're in all that more difficult, because as I said, they are facing so much scrutiny, far more in my opinion than anyone else on that sort of level of the Formula feeder series. Not just because of the show, but because it's all female. There are plenty of social media, there's been plenty of commentary about why do we need all female feeder series, or they're not good enough to make it into Formula One, or else they would have already, which completely ignores whole separate other issues. But the series really did a really good job, to me, in capturing just how much pressure these girls are under, how much they face, and how they overcome it and rely on the people around them and find mental strength and are able to just face these challenges head on every day, especially at the races, but every day. And they're truly incredible people. They're fearless, they're courageous, and I was so happy to get that insight into their lives and how they got to this point, and them fighting to keep their place or fighting to impress so that they can continue to have a future in motorsport as racers. That was really cool insight to me that we got to have as fans watching. And I think I sort of knew what kind of pressure these racing drivers were under, just from a fan perspective. I can read social media. Because these are women, they also face those additional kind of critiques where people aren't willing to give them benefit of the doubt that men are given. In fact, their performances have to sort of be perfect all the way along. But I think that the show showed they can cope with these challenges, and not just cope, they can rise above and be excellent, which is what they are. They're incredible to do what they do. And I think that the pressure was very well communicated through the Netflix series, is what I would say. And maybe if you just touch on some different drivers' pressures that they face. I found Leah Block's story super interesting, and I already knew she was from a rallying background, but to hear that this was her first year, she didn't have karting experience or anything, her decision to go straight into single-seater through F1 Academy was incredibly interesting and seemingly incredibly difficult. I thought she did really well last year, despite essentially facing girls that had a wealth of experience in karting, other single-seater categories. It was a really, really bold, brave move. As a fan, it almost makes me a little bit worried that she's sort of competing in this same academy as the girls, but sort of like without that experience. But I think she's shown that she can be excellent, and she will be. But I also wanted to touch on a comment that she had made, I think it was literally in the first or second episode, where she had been quite upset about either a qualifying or a race, and she said to someone around her, like, "Oh, I didn't eat last night." And I just think that was a really interesting comment as well, that just further demonstrates the pressure that they're under from plenty of external sources, right? But then that internal pressure that many racers face. And I imagine that's not a gendered thing either, but the amount of internal pressure that these girls are under to succeed, to use the 7 or so rounds of F1 Academy to show what they can do, to get opportunities out of this, to grow even further, to make a career as a racer. It's just exceptional that they managed to overcome these challenges, to meet these challenges, rise above, and be as great as they are. So stuff like that gave, for me as a fan, real insight into just how much of a pressure cooker the environment is in something like F1 Academy. Even though it's a feeder series, it is clearly a very tense environment. Everyone has different goals, and they're all reaching and they're all trying, and it's such a tough space to exist in. And I think probably as elite athletes, they are much more used to the competitiveness. They're more used to having to exist, having to thrive in that environment. Like, just as a fan myself, I could not imagine having to do any of that. But yeah, it was the show, I felt, gave that really good insight into the pressure of being an F1 Academy driver and being in F1 Academy. And I'm a big fan, I follow the series quite closely, but I think I never would have known or had as much insight or understood as well that kind of pressure that they face without the Netflix series. So it was really, really interesting for me in that regard. I thought I should also just point out that Susie Wolf's comment about, well, if you can't make it in F1 Academy, you're not going to make it. I think that was said more than once in the series, but I mean, it kind of sucks, but it's true. It is a feeder series, so you can't make it to F1 if you're not, you know, being consistent or consistently excellent in F1 Academy. And I think that's quite logical in the sense of, well, if you're not going to be good in F3, if you're not going to be good in F2, why should you be in F1? The ones who are in F3 and F2 that don't actually perform that well, they can probably do other racing series. They can still have a career as a driver, but I don't know about actually making it into F1. It is fair enough that Susie Wolf made that comment, and I think it is true. And let's be very clear here. She knows far more than me, and she knows far more than I ever will as a fan. But it just shows just that much amount of pressure that they're under. The pressure of just knowing that this is a stepping stone, and if you can't make it here, if you slip, then into the water you go. And because they're women, they're going to have an even harder time sort of justifying their existence, at least at this point in time. That's how it feels, justifying their existence in the car in another series. It just shows how important it is that they do well in F1 Academy. And it's tough, right? But I guess it makes sense. I would view this as opportunities, using and taking opportunities. I think this became a really important thing to talk about through Bianca's story, how Netflix portrayed Bianca's whole character arc throughout the whole series. I think there were 6 or 7 episodes, and she featured almost in every one. And it was this story about her performance. And it was contrasted with a few other girls who said, well, I don't want social media, I'm just here to race. I think that Abby had sort of come across that way at the start, especially when she was just winning. But then later she was taking photos for her merch and developing a merch line to get some extra income. It became apparent that, especially as a female driver with more limited resources, sometimes these things are really important, these opportunities when, you know, you have a following, having merch, using these things to have influence and furthering your career. And I think this is obviously something Bianca does very well. The series was very keen to show, you know, very popular on Instagram, huge following, very influential, front of magazine covers, all these types of things. And it's clear that that has come as a result of her dedication and hard work. The show portrayed that as her losing focus, you know, modeling, influencing at the expense of her motorsports career, as sort of she ended up really struggling in F1 Academy, making, you know, silly mistakes and these types of things. And then having, you know, the McLaren situation at the end of the series as the news was delivered by Susie Wolf. But I think that it's interesting because we saw Abby in the series, for the most part, put her head down and just win and do really, really well. But actually, when you think about what Bianca is doing now outside of F1 Academy, she has a GB3 seat and she's currently racing the full series. Abby Pulling received a fully funded GB3 seat as a result of winning the championship. So these are 2 different girls with wildly different results in F1 Academy, both achieving the same thing as a result of that final year of the series in 2024. And I think that's actually very interesting because they had the same result or the same outcome despite having those wildly different performances. And I think that just showed the value and the importance of using your opportunities, of making sure you have a strong external brand and that you have a fan base, you have sponsors, you have connections, because these things have contributed to Bianca's ability to get a GB3 seat for this year, as Abby Pulling also has. To me, honestly, that was fascinating because it really felt like, despite the huge amounts of criticism that Bianca was getting from like Susie Wolf and I think his name was Warren, her performance coach, despite that intense scrutiny, and I'm not saying it's unjustified, but despite that intense scrutiny, she was still able to have a really, really positive, tangible outcome out of F1 Academy, out of the visibility that F1 Academy gave her. And so I think it's worth noting that despite perhaps the show's insistent on portraying like the influencing, the modeling as a distraction, it actually showed to me as a fan the positives of moves like that. Obviously not when it comes at the expense of your motorsports career or your performance on track, but there is still clearly merit to going out and pursuing those opportunities, growing your brand, growing your fan base, because all these things can assist you in furthering your motorsports career, especially outside of F1 Academy. Which, by the way, I don't know how close Bianca and Warren are, but just as a side note, I couldn't help but feel like, especially in the first, second episode, maybe the third one too, that he would say sort of one thing to the camera, but then actually when we saw him and Bianca together, it was like, all right, you're gonna come back from this, like, we'll go again tomorrow, we're gonna do better, all these things. But to the camera, it was, oh, not good enough, like, oh, that's terrible, oh, she should know better, she's distracted. I was just like, how do you think she's gonna feel when she sees this? I don't know, maybe I'm just being a bit ridiculous, because she said they obviously have a very close relationship. I couldn't help but think that he was so critical towards the camera about her, but then a bit more constructive in person. But I thought that if this was all still going on the show, then what was the merit or the positive in being so critical? But that was just one thing I noticed that I thought was a little bit odd. Like, there wasn't anything particularly bad about it, I guess. So I guess if I could take anything away out of Netflix about the opportunities that the girls make for themselves, that they are given, it would just be that they have to take opportunities, they have to use them, and the outcome can be really, really positive. And I know the Netflix tried to frame it as sort of like almost shaming Bianca for her distraction from the series, the mistakes she was making because she's too busy, you know, being on the cover of Vogue. But I couldn't help but feel that the outcome of them both having GB3 seats, despite perhaps differences in, you know, funding and sponsorship, the outcome being the same was to me quite impactful as a fan, because I'm seeing this and I'm thinking, despite all the mistakes she made, despite finishing around P7 in the championship, she is going to the same series as the person who finished P1. She is able to further her motorsports career by making opportunities for herself, by taking opportunities. And I think that that just can't be discounted. No matter what people take away from the series, no matter what people take away from this year out of both Pulling and Bustamante's performance in GB3, I think that that is really, really critical and really important. And I hope that the girls this year are really taking that to heart and taking that on board when considering how they're growing their own brands and their own followings and gaining personal sponsorships so that they can further their careers. I hope they're really thinking about that. From a fan's perspective, having those opportunities can only assist you in the long run in increasing or continuing your career in motorsports as a driver. And again, I know Netflix tried, in my opinion, to portray Bianca's influence as a negative thing. But when I look at the output, just cut and dry on a piece of paper, Abby Pulling, GB3 Championship, Bianca Bustamante, GB3 Championship, when you just look at that, it really makes you think of the power of influence, the power of social media, the power of personal sponsorships. And I hope that that is something the current girls are keeping in mind. And I guess just as some final comments, I really, really hope they're filming this year. I don't know if F1 The Academy is sort of like a one-off for last year, or maybe they're going to see how this year goes, see the reception to last year's championship, and then maybe develop a series for next year. But I've been loving this year's racing so far, and I really just hope they're filming it so I can watch it back on Netflix. If not, like, I understand. Hopefully they'll be back in 2026. But yeah, I've been loving this season already, and I'm really hoping that they're filming it, because I think we could get some really, really good TV in there, to be honest. I think it would have very, very strong entertainment value, especially with a bunch of the new races that have come in, and I'm sure that they would all have different like characters that Netflix would portray, and I think it would be really cool. This video was meant to be pretty short, but I guess just as an aside, I just wanted to mention the premiere. They had a preview in Miami, and then they had a proper like purple carpet in London, and I thought that was so cool. Everyone looked so good, and the reason I just want to mention it now is I just wanted to throw up some pictures, which is what I'm doing now, just of the different outfits, the different sort of things that went on at those two separate events. I thought it was really cool. I wanted to point out that Red Bull have been really good about bringing their drivers to the F1 Academy preview event in Miami. The Mercedes drivers as well were there, although, you know, Susie is quite closely tied to Mercedes, so to see Red Bull there of their own volition, I thought that was really, really cool. I think that F1 Academy is becoming far too big to ignore. F1 Academy is becoming a strong asset of F1. It's becoming a commercial asset of F1, and I think that can only be seen by this upcoming weekend, where Gatorade and Weller Weller Professionals, which is like a hair care type of company. They've both signed on as partners as well to F1 Academy. It's just growing. They're becoming a viable commercial asset. The series itself, I mean, and that is only a good thing because it means that it will continue and it will continue to support upcoming girls in motorsport, which is, I think it's really cool. And to that end, this is just anecdotal evidence from a fan, but I'm obviously on every F1 weekend all over the socials, like looking at what different teams are posting. And I want to say that before the Netflix series, I felt like we were lucky if any team posted more than maybe one sort of thing on maybe their Instagram or their Facebook, or like a story on Instagram. I felt like we were lucky if we got one thing about F1 Academy, about the driver. For example, like you'd see, like Tina Hausman on the Aston socials going into qualifying, and then they just wouldn't tell you the outcome. This is the first race back since F1 Academy dropped. The Netflix series had the premiere in London. Now I've been seeing 3-4 posts on the main socials of F1 teams. The sponsors as well have been getting around it far more and like commenting and things like that. People have realized that F1 Academy cannot be ignored. It is a legitimate commercial asset of F1 and it is important and it is growing all the time. It's so cool to see, but the switch between racing rounds for F1 Academy has been incredible to see. And I don't know if, again, it's not necessarily factual. This is just anecdotal evidence from myself, but I think it's really cool. And I think that it proves that this Netflix series has already had an impact, has already carried some weight with helping to grow awareness of F1 Academy and also help make them more important, even to their own teams that sponsor them. F1 Academy, as Netflix showed, is legitimate, it's real, it's here to stay, and we can only hope for more success in the future. We can only hope for more Netflix series of it in the future because I loved it. As I said at the start, I literally cried the whole time, but I was engaged, like eyes on the TV the whole time. So I really can only hope that the success of the series continues, and not just F1 Academy, the series, but the Netflix series as well. I hope plenty of people go and watch it and that it can help amplify these girls and their platforms and F1 Academy more broadly. I hope younger girls can see the series, get interested in F1 Academy and think, hey, I can do that too. And if that is a proper outcome of this Netflix series, it can only be considered a positive thing. And I know its primary value is entertainment value. That's kind of how TV works. And that's evident through the way that they cut the series together. But ultimately, if it has a positive impact on how many girls are considering joining motorsport, are seeing other women lead the way forward and think that they can join, then I think that that is a really special, really positive thing. And Netflix and Hello Sunshine and all the people involved in producing the series should be really proud of themselves and the tangible impact that they have had on increasing awareness of F1 Academy and also assisting the girls in the series on their journeys. So yes, this ended up being absolutely very long. I can ramble on all day. It is a problem. I'm trying to fix it. But until then, there's nothing much more to say other than thank you so much for watching, and I'll maybe see you later.